Okay, I would like to call to order the Monday, October 21st meeting of the City of Monona City Council. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Rademacher. Here. Alder Bernstein.
Here.
Alder DePulo.
Here.
Alder Holmquist. Alder Moore. Here. Alder Wood.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have kind of a big agenda tonight. First item, approval of minutes from July 25th, August 5th and 19th, September 3rd, 16th and 30th, and October 7th, 2024. Alina's really been working here, so with some help from Leah. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. We have one appearance tonight, Morgan Sally, who is representing Congressman Mark Pocan's office. If you'd like to come up to the table here, just wanted to give us a little update.
Alright. It looks like it's already green, so we
I
good?
think
Okay.
you're good. Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Well, good evening, y'all. Like Mayor O'Connor said, my name is Morgan Solly. I'm a field representative with Congressman Mark Pocan. I didn't want to take up too much of your time tonight. Looks like you have a pretty packed agenda. But I did want to stop by and put a face to a name. For those of you who don't know me or haven't met me, like I said, representing Congressman Pocan, I do a lot of work out in the district, so I'm traveling quite a bit for our office and just being a face for the office, especially when Mark is not here and in DC or elsewhere. My main purpose for attending tonight is to talk a bit about the direct impact that our office can make for you all and your constituents. The first service that our office offers is broadly just constituent services, where our casework team serves as a liaison between a constituent and a federal agency. We cover all federal agency casework areas in our Madison office, but a few examples of topics we may be able to assist with would be passports, issues with the IRS, Veterans Affairs, Small Business Administration, or Department of Agriculture. Another service that our office can offer would be letters of support from Mark. If there's an organization in the community applying for a federal grant, oftentimes Mark would be able to send along a letter of support to accompany that federal grant application. Our office also has the ability, limitedly, to research potential grant opportunities for constituents. So right now, grant services is one of the things that I coordinate alongside being a field representative. So if there is a potential applicant, whether that be an organization or, say, a city government, that is seeking a federal grant, but doesn't necessarily know what might be available for a project, but like you have a project and you're just wondering if a federal grant may line up with it, that's something that I can oftentimes research for folks, and that's a service that our office can offer. The only caveat there is that I need to be able to connect directly with whoever is applying, so it wouldn't be able to be like on behalf of an applicant. It would be whoever has the most information on the project and who would be the one applying for the grant. Finally, myself and the rest of our team are in frequent contact with our legislative staff and the congressman to ensure any community needs are communicated directly to Mark, as well as relevant policy staff. So we're always happy to collect opinions and also pass along local concerns tied to federal policy. That's all I have for you tonight. I also brought along some business cards that I'll pass out to you all.
Great.
So if any questions come up that you don't have time to ask tonight, please feel free to send me an email or give our office a call, and we'd be happy to chat with you.
Great.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions right now? I'm sure we have some things we'd like to contact you about in the future.
Please feel free to reach
So,
out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
having
coming.
me.
Great.
I'll start down here.
Okay.
Thanks, Morgan.
All right, moving on. There is no public hearing, no consent agenda. Moving on to council action items, I am going to move item 1D up after item 1B. But we will start with 1A, consideration of ordinance 9-24-779, amending the Code of Ordinances pertaining to the Landmarks Committee chairperson. This is put forth by the Landmarks Commission and was tabled at the October 7th, 2024 council meeting. So is there a motion to take this off the table?
Out of order?
No, isn't that what we have to do?
Oh, to
is
take it off
Take
the
it off
table.
the table?
Sorry.
Yeah. Were you
Can
motioning
I
that?
do that?
Yeah.
I move to take this off the table.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, Thor, were you going to talk about this, or Teresa, did you want to talk about it, or you were the one who decided to pull it
Yeah.
off last time? I didn't know if you
Yeah.
wanted to.
I just wanted to take this back to the Landmarks Commission for discussion after hearing from a couple of my colleagues about why this committee at one time did have a citizen chair and what was perceived to be the benefits of having an alder as chair. In committee discussion, one of the points that was raised, and Thor, you can correct me if I'm misremembering, one of the points that was raised is that while there was sort of an uptick in positive activity, the members of the committee didn't feel that it was necessarily because of there being an alder chair, but rather because there was a very sound ordinance that was newly adopted and written in a way that sort of set things in motion. At the end of the day, we talked about how this current ordinance language, which has not changed since the last time you saw it, how this current language allows for there to still be an alder as the chair, and it also allows for a co-chair if the mayor wishes, and that co-chair can be a non-elected person.
Questions, anyone, or comments? Nancy, did you have, or Thor, I guess if you have a question, Thor, did you want to add anything? I'm sorry.
Yeah, not too much. So like Alder Rademacher mentioned, this still would not require that an alder needs to be chair. It could still be a citizen member. And the Landmarks Commission was okay with if council does want to make any amendments, they were comfortable with that requirement that a alder person be the chair, but they didn't want to amend their original recommendation. If there is an amendment, they wanted that to come from council.
Nancy?
Yeah, so, if I'm correct, there are currently three, or two.
I can't hear Nancy.
Sorry?
Your microphone is a little quiet.
If I'm correct, there are currently two other city committees, commissions, or boards, is that right, that have citizen members, being the fire
And that's
police-
required by state law.
Right,
think.
both of which are required by state law.
Mhm.
There's
Fire
a
and
three,
Police
actually,
Commission.
right? There's
CDA,
CDA,
Fire
there's
and Police Commission,
Fire and Police, and the Library Board.
Library Board.
Yeah.
Right, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
And in the event that there wasn't because of the way this is written, in the event that there wasn't a citizen member that could serve as chair or that was interested in serving as chair, there would still be an alder that could serve as chair.
Yeah, as written, an alder will be a member of the committee.
Right.
The alder may or may not be the chair at the
Right.
discretion of the mayor.
Right, but that leaves open the possibility that an alder could step in as chair if a citizen didn't
Yes.
step forward.
Yes,
Or the alder could just be appointed chair.
Right.
correct.
Although, Teresa, you said this would allow a member as a co-chair, but that isn't really what this says, right? Doesn't this say either an alder
Yeah.
or a member as the chair?
Maybe I've
That's what
misread.
that was the compromise you had talked about,
Right,
not. that's
but
not what
when
this
I Correct. The compromise I talked about, which Alderwood is referring to, is that instead of having a citizen chair, we would have co-chairs on this committee where an alder could still be the chair and a citizen could be the co-chair. And when we talked about that at the commission meeting, members felt that the current language did already allow for that to happen.
It doesn't really, does it?
No, well, it says shall designate a chairperson, singular.
But the last, but at the discretion of the mayor, the chairperson, or the chairman
maybe
should be
either-
shared by any two members
Or
as
the chairman
co-chairpersons.
by any two members as co-chairpersons.
Right.
I guess I didn't hear that. So that
Yeah,
wouldn't necessarily be it could be an alder and a member, it could be two members.
correct,
Okay.
exactly. And all of this still would put the decision, it would remain with the mayor,
Mhm.
yeah.
And what are we, since it doesn't lessen certainly the responsibilities of the alders any, because there's one alder now, and it doesn't change the number of people on landmarks in any way,
Mhm.
what problem,
Are we trying to solve?
yeah.
No, fair enough question. I wouldn't call it a problem, I would call it an opportunity that I'd like to open the door to. It feels that other communities do allow citizens to take more of leadership positions on committees. And oftentimes when, we as alders, we have our eyes open for who might take our place one day. Allowing, this is just one way that we could essentially grow another new generation of leadership. And it feels also like a pretty low-risk approach. We still would have the alder there to provide a liaison to city staff. We would have a citizen who would be more engaged in setting the agenda together with the alder.
It's assuming the alder and the citizen work together.
Correct. And I think that's perhaps another conversation in that the role of co-chair differs from committee to committee. It really does depend who the chair is. Sometimes co-chairs are more active in setting the agenda, sometimes they're not. So conversation for a different day on that, really, though. But
Anyone else have a comment? Doug?
Yeah, well, first, just a little bit more, or background, that there was a time, not, maybe 10 years ago or so, where there was not even an alder on the committee. And that was sort of the big change that we made, and
Yeah.
that raised the profile of the committee. I would point out that the ordinance that they reference being passed, that wouldn't have probably have passed if it hadn't had an alder as the chair of the committee, or certainly on the committee. But I guess I kind of look at it like this is part of our job as alders, is to chair the committees in setting aside the few that we can't. And this committee could have some really big decisions coming before it, especially what to do with the house at Sandom. And to me, I think it's more appropriate, for an alder to be at the lead, in the chair for those kind of decisions. We're elected and the committee members aren't, so.
I do not disagree with you. I do not disagree with you at all. And again, what my personal preference would be for the chair to continue to be held by an alder, and for this committee to have a co-chair, which could be a non-elected person. Like many of our committees have co-chairs, where there are two alders. This committee could have a co-chair, but instead of having another alder, it could have a citizen co-chair.
One thing I would just clarify about the co-chairs, in all but the transit committee, the co-chair is actually a vice chair. We just call it co-chair, but they're
Okay.
not two equal positions, just so everybody's clear
Yeah.
on that. But anyone else? Okay, well then, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. We will move on to item 1B, consideration of resolution 24-10-2743, approving the 2025 through 2029 capital improvements program and 2025 capital borrowing. Is there a motion to approve this?
Motion to
I'll move
approve?
Second.
Okay, we have 5 amendments here that are in your packet. We also have several staff members who are here either via Zoom or in person if you have any questions. Guess we'll just take these amendments in order. Amendment 25-01, an amendment to add a pedestrian flash beacon at Maywood and Nichols. The funding would be from GO bonds, and this was sponsored by Alders Holmquist and Bernstein. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval. Second.
Any questions or discussion? Nancy?
Yeah, Alder Bernstein, thank you for sending me the picture. I do have a question as it relates to the design and eventual redoing of Nichols. And that is.
When we do the road project?
Yes.
Mhm.
So when we do that project, I know one of the things that we're looking at doing is getting rid of, and it would not be Maywood and Nichols, one would presume, since that's a heavily trafficked crossing area for the school. But are we envisioning that there would be additional or extra expense involved in moving the flashing beacon? In doing, if we were to put this flash beacon in now, as opposed to waiting until the redesign?
Brad, do you have an answer for that? Because is this one that's going to be able to be solar, do we know, or are we going to have to do the electrical wiring for it?
I believe that what we purchased was solar rapid flashing beacon, so this can be moved and reset at whatever intersection we put it at or want to put it at, so
Fantastic.
that is correct.
Fantastic. Thank you for that clarity.
Mark, did you have?
I think we talked last time that this one would be a wire one, if I'm not correct. So this one wouldn't be, so I don't know if that makes a difference for the cost. I believe we talked because of the coverage and everything, I think we had to have it wired in.
Yeah, I guess that's a question, Brad. Dan thinks it's wired, you think it's not, so.
Oh, if the original was going to be a solar at this location, if it's too far apart, then they do have to do wiring because they can't communicate across the intersection if it's too far apart. So I wasn't aware that it wasn't going to be a solar one at this location.
Okay, so Dan, as far as you know, it is a wired one.
It would be wired because of the tree canopy.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about.
It is the wide open view, so that could be solar.
Got it.
But in any case, if it's wired or not, it can be moved.
Yeah.
Okay. And whatever wiring, would that be an additional expense to move it with the wiring, or?
It'd be minimal in the future.
Okay.
There's power right there, so it's just a matter of moving the dropper or extending it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, I just have,
Alder
then,
Moore.
if you're saying that the Southtown, I'm looking at a difference of, $7,000 between the two, right? And so,
Southtown is
You should get
three
a
additional
mic.
lanes of traffic, so you need 2 systems on Southtown.
thank you.
Sure.
Just wanted to make sure it wasn't somehow flip-flopped in the amendment. Thank you.
Should we have folks speaking into microphones
Pardon?
should we have folks speaking to microphones if there are?
If there's any more
If
questions,
there's
we'll
more,
have Dan come
yeah,
out.
okay.
Any other questions? If there aren't any, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next amendment, 25-02, an amendment to add a pedestrian flash beacon at Southtown Drive. This funding would come from TIF number 15. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Second.
Dan, would you like to come up in case they have questions? Or does anyone have questions for Dan?
I got one quick thing. We did look into this. with the IRA, the Infant Reduction Act. We got an email just recently from the county who believes this probably would qualify for some type of payback. But we probably won't get that payback till after it's installed. So we'll have a better idea when we borrow the money, if we need to borrow for this, and it's TIF related. So there is a possibility we're going to get money back from the IRS on this.
And I assume for the other one too?
The other one is not from the IRA because it's not.
Oh, it's because it's
wired.
wired.
Not solar.
Okay. Any other questions for Dan? Brian?
Mark, given the one that we just installed, is that one
Yeah,
eligible?
right. You just think about that, we probably need to look into that one. So
Okay.
My guess is, Alder, that it would be eligible to be submitted.
it will be.
I think that, like Kathy Coons from Dane County said, that we can't get the full cost of the pole, the base, and everything, but the actual renewable energy components of the beacon.
Sweet.
So that aspect, we just have to work with our vendor to make sure to try to isolate out that particular cost.
I don't think that's the expensive part, it'd be more the expensive part.
Yeah.
Well, every little bit helps.
It does.
Alderwood?
Yeah, why is this one 21,000 and the other is 14?
Southtown has up to 6 lanes of traffic, including the left turn lanes. So you need 2 systems to cross both sections, similar to the one on West Broadway at Falcon Circle. There's a double system there as well, whereas the ones out here on Nichols only have 1 system.
Yeah,
Hmm.
okay.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 25-03, amendment to put the Parks electric vehicle back in the budget with $10,000 in carryover funding, $12,500 from GO bonds and $7,500 from the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA. This is sponsored by Alders Wood and Rodermacher. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move to approve?
Second.
I don't know if anybody from Parks is here.
I think Jake is.
Jake, did you want to address this?
I don't have anything further, Mayor, than what's in the packet. I think I indicated the amount of use that this vehicle gets, given the amount of staff that we have in our peak seasons, April through October.
Mhm.
Just want to make a point that the funding for this is very different from what was originally proposed. Is that correct?
How?
The only thing that's, I'm not sure.
Well, we didn't have the $7,500
Right, we
from
didn't have that
the
in there,
IRA
right.
before.
Okay.
We did have the carryover and
Mhm.
the GO bonds. So I
Okay.
guess my only concern with including that line about the IRA funding is if somehow that didn't happen, I'd still, like, the intent is we want to make sure that this happens this year because, you know, it was in the budget, I think, last year, but then we didn't get the grant from the tourism grant.
Well, I think we could have had it if we had agreed to do
Mm-hmm.
something that we didn't want to do. Mark, you've been assured that this would be covered, haven't you?
Well, I mean,
Or
it's
no,
not assured, but the county did, the county met with all the department heads, kind of went through what's covered and not covered. And she basically flat out said that as long as it's fully electric, we would get reimbursed. And they applied for, I believe, 8, and they got reimbursed for all their 8. So
Okay,
I'm assuming, I mean, there's paperwork, but other than that,
right.
it should be approved.
Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have to pay for the full amount of the vehicle and then request the reimbursement.
Yeah,
though.
but for 75,
From a cash flow standpoint, we will still have to.
Yeah, I'm not going to borrow from that 75.
Right.
And the reimbursements happen pretty quickly, is my understanding.
Yeah.
You don't have to go through all kinds of rigmarole to,
No, you just gotta get an IRS number, and there's a little, I mean, she told us she'd help us, walk us through the process, because I think for them, they said it's a little bit of paperwork to get everything set up.
Yeah, I think it's setting it up is where the majority of the work is.
Like the
Mayor,
first time.
But I think once that's set up, you simply have to turn in the invoice with the project number and show that it's been expended as originally said, and they'll process it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So I think the upfront part is really where the work is.
Yeah.
and we'll be doing it for these flash beacons as well,
Yeah,
right?
so we'll do the one for this year, and I know the chief has mentioned already, that he's gonna probably look into it for this, which is in the budget, for all-electric vehicle for his farm, so we'll probably get reimbursed for that too. So we probably won't borrow that much, we'll know what that is. I think the max is 7,500. So.
Alder Moore.
So, having watched the Zoom, the committee of the whole, I'm like in complete concurrence with Jake Anderson. I'm perplexed as to why the Tourism Commission didn't see this as a fit, and I'm wondering if it can go back through the Tourism Commission, because, I mean,
I
the
think
number of-
tourism just wanted him to put some decals advertising hotels on the back, and he didn't want to do that, is my understanding.
Because it just seems,
I-
I mean,
Yeah.
with the number of festivals and the number of, the number of festivals and the number of events that we do, walks, runs, it just seems like a obvious connection to
And I think
to bring
tourism was
people to
fine with
Manila.
that, but part of their deal is they have to be promoting
Right,
the hotels, so
right.
that's, Teresa?
I haven't really fully baked this thought, so bear with me, but why do we need advertisements of hotels plastered on our city vehicles when this is in line with our sustainability goals? We have this is astounding, 3 park staff. If we can help them buzz over across, a stretch of road quickly so that they can work more
Well,
productively.
Teresa, they also have pickup trucks and things they drive.
Right, but those pickup trucks are gas guzzlers. This feels like,
It just seemed like
Yeah.
a good idea when we were trying to restrain our capital borrowing, and we have money in tourism, and this is something that could be used for tourism projects, and as you know, being on the tourism committee, part of the deal with getting tourism funding is that we have to promote hotels,
right.
so.
And I certainly could go back and watch those recordings. I don't recall there being any strong pushback from anybody about, putting, wrapping a vehicle with,
On the
a
tourism
hotel.
committee,
Yeah,
you mean?
correct.
I don't think there was.
Correct.
The Parks Department doesn't want to do it, is my understanding.
I didn't even get the impression from Parks that there was a pushback, but I might be wrong. I might be wrong about that. So
Would it necessarily involve
I'm not
wrapping,
even
or is
sure
it
that
just one
we-
little decal?
I think certainly that could be negotiated, Mayor. I think the situation is simply, Alder, that using any sort of tourism funding for a direct expenditure with anything related to do with the city is one way to raise an audit flag pretty fast.
Okay.
So in terms of kind of pursuing it through, like I said, then advertising sponsorship for those hotels, that is a closer to what the spirit of what the room tax is meant to be doing. So that's
yep.
simply why that was being proposed in
Yeah.
that matter.
No, I fully understand that aspect of, if we wanted to pursue tourism dollars, why we would have to wrap the vehicle. I guess where I'm coming from is, why do we have to wrap the vehicle, period? Why can't we just proudly display City of Monona logo on an electric vehicle and tell everyone where our values are? And look for other ways to use tourism dollars, or, I don't know. I don't have a solution. Like I said, I'm kind of thinking out
We're
loud
just
here.
trying to save money on
Yep,
capital spending.
absolutely, totally.
We have a
yes,
lot of other things
Totally understand.
people would like us to borrow for.
Yeah,
And when
right.
we have another source of money that's readily available, it seems silly not to use it, is my feeling.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking that this e-vehicle could prevent the purchase of a gas-powered vehicle.
I don't think so. I think it's an addition. Parks has quite a few vehicles they drive around in.
Right.
And I don't doubt that they would use this electric one. I
Yeah.
don't at all. I don't know, Neil, if you had anything to add, or?
I think it's certainly, just from personal witnessing, certainly at the last festival, the use of this vehicle, certainly at like the Fall Fest, the existing one was extremely handy.
Yeah.
Director Anderson, certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the ability to be able to cover that much ground and
Right.
actually be on the ground with a lighter vehicle,
Right.
to be able to move personnel and staff is certainly an asset, I think, to the park staff.
Yep. Anybody else? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 25-04 An amendment to change the funding source from GO to TIF number 15 for Southtown Engineering. This is for a street on Southtown Drive Engineering. This project is within a half mile of TIF 15. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move approval.
Second.
Yeah, we didn't
Mark,
originally
did
put
you
it in
wanna-
there just because we don't know right now. I mean, there's a developer's agreement in process right now. I think we were being probably cautious to make sure that's going to be approved. If it doesn't get approved, then there'd be no funding. That's why we originally left it in the GO. But it is within a half mile, and it sounds like we might be near, I guess I shouldn't say what the CDA is doing, but I assume they're getting closer to a developer's agreement, so this would make sense then.
This is for the Topgolf
Yeah.
thing, right? Yeah. Anyone have any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Final item, amendment to move the library roof replacement to 2027, which was discussed at the committee of the whole meeting, and I am sponsoring this one. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Discussion, questions? I think we're just trying to keep the capital borrowing.
Well, this is when we ran into, they also came up like another $300,000.
Right.
Don't remember the exact number, but it was a additional cost.
More
It was-
expensive than we originally
Yeah.
planned. And we really have to do the public works roof
Correct.
next year, since
Right.
there's mold there and
And
some other
20
things.
26 will be Tanyawatha.
I sure hope so.
But, I mean, that's
That's what it's planned.
That's the plan.
right. I mean, because they're all big enough that we can't really do, well, it'd be
Correct.
hard to do two of them in 1 year.
Right, and Tony Watha is 3 million,
Yeah.
whatever, some of that's utilities, but Alder Bernstein.
Yeah, so with the solar panels, they'll be taken down, but they won't be put back up, is that correct?
I think we need to,
I mean,
Or do we know?
I don't know if you want to take this one.
Sure. Well, the agreement gives us the right to terminate the contract, meaning they'd have to take them off. The plan at the staff level would be to have a discussion with them and say, listen, if after we replace the roof, if you want to put them back up, we would be in agreement with doing that as long as it doesn't cost the city. The issue, I think, from the vendor standpoint is going to be that the loss of those panels, does that take away enough of their profit where we only have the right to terminate the agreement in total, terminate or not. We can't partially terminate. So we're going to discuss that with them. At the end of the day, though, if they say no, it's an all or nothing deal, then we're going to have to remove the panels from all of them.
Right,
Yeah.
all the buildings.
Yep, exactly right.
So there'll be a cost in terms of lost power generation.
Correct.
We accounted for that
You did,
in the operating budget, for, we haven't seen.
okay. But some of that will come out of the library budget, right?
Yeah,
Like 4,000 a year, I heard.
something like that. I don't know the exact dollar amount, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brad, did you want to add something?
Yeah, Bill, is it possible that if we remove the panels, or if we have Solar Legacy Co-op remove them, that the PSC would not allow us to put them back up again without a new negotiation?
I haven't looked at that question. I don't think so. I think we have the PSC approval. This would be a maintenance project. So I think from PSC standpoint, we could put them back on because they've approved them previously.
Because nothing would change in terms of net metering.
No,
Wait.
everything would be the same as it is now. Correct.
And this
And-
project would again apply, I mean, once we replace it, I think we have to 31, I believe. So it does meet the IRA requirement, so that we would get some type of funding back. We would be, once we do go back to put them on, if we own them, if I understand that correct.
So I mean, if we got rid of this agreement with Solar Legacy,
And we eventually do our own solar, then we have a total different
Right.
thing with PSC, I assume.
Correct.
But we would have to work with the IRA and get some type of funding for it. That dollar amount, I don't know, so.
That's really a discussion for another day, though.
Yes,
because
it is.
obviously, that would be a large expenditure
Yeah.
for the city to do that.
But I think it's, I believe, 31, right?
I believe that's correct. 31 meaning what?
IRA goes to 2031.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We're going back to the original motion to approve the capital budget. Approving it as amended. I guess would the clerk please call the roll? All in favor?
Alder Bernstein?
Aye.
Alder DePula?
Patrick?
Alder Holmquist?
Aye.
Alder Moore?
Aye.
Alder Wood?
Aye.
Alder Rademacher?
Aye.
Capital budget is approved. Thank
Yep.
you.
Mayor, may I just say one thing before we move on? You know, and this is more for the benefit of our public, I think, than anything else. But, you know, the benefit of being away on business for 7 weeks is that you get some distance from the everyday, day-to-day business that I know you all have been going through. But, you know, in watching the committee of the whole on the capital budget on Zoom, I would just say a couple of things. One is I would really encourage, in addition to citizens coming to the public information meetings or meeting with staff over the referendum, with the referendum questions, I would really encourage citizens to do the same, to watch the video of the Committee of the Whole on the capital budget and the Committee of the Whole on the operating budget. Because there were a few takeaways from me that really kind of hit me in a big way, and I can't help but think our citizens would as well. First of all, you know, it was just a friendly reminder that we have very intentionally kept our borrowing low, which is to say around 3 million for as long as I've been on council, which is now inching up on 8 years. And the staff understands, and so does every council member, that that's what we needed to do, right? So, and second, we've always had to make tough decisions, make tough choices, you know. And the notion that either the council or the staff thinks that money grows on trees, or that we've been reckless with the city's finances and borrowing, is just wrong. It's just wrong. And I think if you see those meetings, you'll understand that. And the third thing, you know, as I was listening, is I was just struck again by the discipline and the restraint and the incredible expertise of the staff. I mean, we're so lucky as a community to have the depth of knowledge that they bring day in and day out, not to mention their work ethics. And they're worth every penny. I mean, it would be a huge loss to the city. And I mean a huge financial loss too. I mean, we talk about this, you guys talked about this in Personnel and Finance a few minutes ago. You know, every staff member we've lost, if we're fortunate to be able to rehire somebody, it's always with less experience, obviously with a lot less knowledge of the city itself, not to mention their own discipline. And so I just want our community to know, and I think if they watch these meetings, they will see and feel that kind of depth of knowledge and the discipline that we all have exercised as a council and as staff members for, like I said, certainly as long as I've been around and a lot longer. So,
Well, thank you.
You know, creativity. I mean, the number of grants that were mentioned. You know, the pursuit of grants that we do all the time. The grants that we've lost because of our state legislature, which I could go into too. But you know, I think it's very impressive, and I think our community needs to know. So.
Well, thank you, and I think we would all second that
Absolutely.
So thank you all. And now we are going to move on to the other topic affecting our staff, which is why we are moving this up a little bit in case we have questions for staff. Discussion with possible action on potential service and program reductions to be considered as part of a failed operating referendum scenario put forth by the city administrator, and Neil has included a staff memorandum with some broad outlines here on page 45 of the packet. So Neil, if you want to.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to provide a couple highlights, and I'll turn it over to Mark to talk about some of the financial specifics. Essentially, this want to be clear, this is not a recommendation by any stretch of the imagination at this point. This is simply a presentation of a potential Senate budget scenario should the referendum not pass. Wanted to at least get some working numbers in front of alders so we can start at least having that conversation. It was noted that obviously if it does not pass, just in terms of how this relates to the overall budget schedule, I think Mayor made a good point in finance and personnel, that certainly if the referendum passes, that budget scenario is largely prepared and we'll go through and we'll be able to move that fairly quickly over to council for review with departments. That should be ready to go. If it does not pass, there are currently two different scenarios, which Mark will touch on as we go through, in terms of deciding exactly which scenario we end up pursuing if it does not move forward. But wanted to at least start setting the table for some of those discussions, which is what this memo attempts to do. So we are, identifying the following revenue assumptions. So that does include, would be, again, the failed referendum scenario, implementation of a wheel tax at $40 a vehicle, garbage shifting from a special charge off of the tax revenue, which is, certainly is a shift in the revenue, and Mark can talk a little bit about that as well. I think an important one thing to note is in here is that the Adams Outdoor Billboard that is currently being reviewed by Plan Commission, that revenue is incorporated into the revenue projection at this point. So if for some reason that does not pass, that would need to be removed from that projection. We're continuing to assume a minimal net new construction and minimal shared revenue options in terms of kind of going forward. A couple of items that we wanted to make sure and note here, that there are still some uncertainty that we're going to be having to deal with as we prepare all of our budget scenarios. Certainly the assumption has been since I think back in February when the compensation plan was originally kind of adopted by this body. The assumption is that we're going to be implementing that compensation plan at 60% of the market. What is not included in this projection that we have in some of these numbers is the longevity adjustments at this point. Again, for the failed referendum scenario, and there also is some current litigation risk with a couple of active cases that we will be unsure exactly what the impacts of those until those are completed. With that, in terms of what, I guess I'm going to turn it over to Mark here at this point to talk a little bit about, how we would be implementing the compensation plan. Just to note that we're looking at, obviously, the referendum was a 5-year window that we're kind of looking through 2029. The extent of the increase of costs that we would have to need to maintain the cuts was we felt that a 3-year window in terms of this scenario was more appropriate and a little bit more manageable. So this wanted to make sure that was clear, that note of why those two numbers were different. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark, if I could, please.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here. So basically in here, kind of the staff memo.
Mark, do you want to move the mic up nearer to you? Thank you.
So, there's two things going on with the failed referendum budgets. There's two options. One is implementing a 60% wage adjustment, and that's the only thing get implemented in this, and then 1% non-personnel. So it does, but also that includes, kind of a COLA. Everybody else gets an increase, which includes your benefits, FICA, Wisconsin retirement. In the referendum, there was money for longevity adjustment. That is no longer would be in there. Other personnel-related costs, we had the overtime for public safety and non-public safety. That would not be in there. And paid on premise and paid on call, which is very important. That's $134,000. That would not be in there. So I'm just kind of going on what's not going to be in there. Non-personnel, so we have like $300,000 estimated, and that's about 10%. We did put like at least 1%. In reality, this is a big thing. 10% was probably getting us back to where it was close to where it should be. At 1%, we're still falling behind. In the referendum, there was assessment changes. I don't know if you remember, we're going to do walkthroughs, that would no longer. We have expenses that we were trying to move from the capital budget to the operating. That's about 100,000. That would no longer be in there. Additional training, police and fire for additional training, and then additional maintenance costs. I don't know if you're listening to the or if you look through your financial report through the third quarter. There's a lot of building expenses. Most of them are in each department are over their budgets already through September, and so there's money for that, which is not included in these numbers. So IT support, I mentioned it in finance. We're going over the operating budget. We just can't keep up with their IT supports. It seems like daily there's an issue where somebody has to call our IT person. If they can't, a lot of times even with our one example, just recently we had. So if you pay your utility bills, if you pay online through PSN, it talks to our server and it automatically updates their system. Well, there was problems, they say, with our servers. So people paid and they weren't getting credited to their accounts because they can't talk. And it was our server issues. So we had one of the days that our IT person doesn't work, we had to call them in, and fix it. I mean, some of the stuff you can do online, but, so we had somebody call and say, hey, why is not my account updated? Well, it's because there's server issues. And this, doesn't happen often, but it happens a couple times a month. There's something to do with have server problems. Just everything's kind of old, and then they got to come in and fix it. If there's a virus, everybody's trying to catch up with the virus. They're always trying to fix those things. They're updating our software. And that was like $150,000, and that includes all these software's expenses. So that's not included in these budgets. So there was two options. One was implementing the 60% and 1% non-personnel. That gets us within $105,000 roughly, give or take a little bit. Depends on some changing numbers. The other one, that includes the $40 for wheel tax per car, and then shifting the garbage to the special charge, and that's about $156 roughly, give or take a couple dollars. So those things would happen automatically. Like you talked, the Adams one, we have that in our projections. I know it's tabled right now at Planning Commission. I know there's issues with how it affects the ordinance. But for now, I have it in my projections. We'll see how that turns out. So that one, we would need that for the balance to 60%. And so we'd have the 105,000 short this year. In the future years, then you have about 285 to 300 or 395,000, and then 2027, a running total of 685. You'd have to come up. Look at number 3. It's not 1.185. It's really 685,000 over 3 years. So that's what we have to come up with. And I was just looking at our 2024 budget. Our 2024 operating levy is about $5 million. Operating is $5,442,000. And between the police, dispatch, and fire, you're about at 400,000. That's reducing like revenues. So right there, majority of your stuff is in the
400,000 or 4 million?
$4 million. I'm sorry, $4 million out of the 5,442,000. So a lot of it's all in public safety. So we're kind of cutting everything else. And technically, fire, we have a little bit of issue there. One, if you cut stuff, there's always going to be time issues. You're going to be, delayed response times and things like that. But they have a maintenance of service issue with the state. So we got the state aid last year, and part of the thing is you can't cut anything, police or the fire and EMS. So it's really one of those things you can't really touch as much. Police you can. It's maintenance of service. It's only for populations of 20,000 or more. So we don't meet that 20,000. So they are like everybody else. They're subject to the cuts too. Like the fire, a little bit tougher overall. But again, that's, majority way over half of our stuff is in the public safety with that. So next 3 years, we'd have to make some major cuts. We're looking at executive up to, 30,000 there is changing our office hours. Just because one of the reasons would be, part of it is we need time to do our work. And like our city planner, he's there 8 to 5, but somebody's calling him every day, from 8 to 5, for close, it gives him time to catch up on everything. And all departments are like that. So things like one of those things that maybe changing our office hours, there'd be some savings on that. Assessments reducing back to the current level where we just kind of do a market value change. Law enforcement right now, we have a current position open. And right now we have on hold, so we know what's going on with the referendum. That's one of the things we're looking at is not filling that position. But also puts a strain on the police department. Inspections to kind of reduce the hours in there. That would actually affect both kind of code enforcement and building inspections. I will say that Doug has really managed the revenue and the expense side because he oversees that. We've actually cut back on the hours. We've actually had a lot of savings in there with them cutting back on the hours. So there's a little bit we use that to offset some cost. Maybe reduce it even more. Dispatch, eventually if it gets to the year 27, 28, there's going to be some things we have to look at. Do we start looking at the county? Do we laying some staff off there? Shop, streets. A lot of it's cleaning budgets, building maintenance budgets. They're starting to already go over budgets. It's going to eventually have to come out of fund balance to pay for them. Reducing, brush collection, maybe from 4 to 2. Some of the things we're looking at, closing the hours down for the yard maintenance. Shutting it down. I don't know how many months it's open now, but I'm just going to say 6 and maybe reduce it down to 4 or 3 months. Things we're looking at, that type of stuff. Parks, we're looking to reduce, their part-time wages if that's the way to go, and that's just going to mean delayed mowing. Some parks might have to be, grass might have to be a little bit longer for a while, and things like that. So 37,000 right there. So these are a lot of the options we're kind of looking at. Planning. A lot of these things we don't want to do. Maybe the part-time staff. Now we just go from 1.5 down to 1. Community media. Reduction of part-time hours. And that's really somebody who's kind of working with the programmers or the volunteers. Helps with putting the shows on, so things like that. Maybe they change the format they go. Reduction in public library, maybe go reduce it by 1 day, with equivalent to reducing 1 staff or 2. That ends up being. Same thing with senior center, kind of reducing programs, shared rides. The pool. Looking at the pool, the pool is one of those things that's hard each year to come up with a profit. And anybody who has a pool in Dane County would probably tell you the same thing. It's difficult each year, one, because of the weather, just so many things that could happen in that. And 2, if you looked at our financials so far through September, chemicals have just exploded on us, that cost. Repair and maintenance, we have that in a lot of the operating, but a lot of 2, if you look at the capital, a lot of stuff is in the capital, and that just keeps the pool open. So when you talk about the capital and why we're borrowing some of the stuff is just keep some of the operations open. They're not running operating expenses, but they're really capital, they're repairs, they're borderline. We're trying to get back into the operating. We need those things in the capital to keep the operating going on that. Transit, we just talked with the Madison Metro. One of the things that we might have to look at. Hopefully, I read today there was an article, and maybe we're looking at regional transportation, so maybe that's something that would help us in the future. And hiring freezes, definitely, if there's certain positions, we have to freeze them, if it's like a certain position where you can't, say the city planner left, you need a city planner, so you couldn't really freeze that position. But there'd be certain positions where there's multiple people, let's say the library staff, or you might have to freeze that, or public works staff for a little bit. So things like that you would freeze, but, you know, if there's a one-man shop, you're not gonna freeze it, so, things like that. But these are things we're looking at. As you can see, the long-term stuff. But really, the first year, we're looking at about 105, and then 2026, you know, around 395. These are all estimate, they're all subject to change. So we're doing our best to balance them. You know, the problem is, you know, and then new construction is zero. You know, last year was zero, this year's 25,000. So it's difficult. And our insurance alone this year, I believe was ended up being 7 point something. But when I look at it, I believe it was like $80-some thousand increase just alone in insurance when you put that percentage in. And that's well above our, you know, our net new construction number. So that's why you look at the future, that's why the number keeps on growing. And just in general, non-personnel to me is one of the things that we're not keeping up with. We'll still have to, you know, squeeze everything by. And just in general too is, I mean, all the department heads are here. If you look at their budgets, you know, if it wasn't for like a big major repair or something like that, they stay within their budgets. So, you know, like they're probably, they'll complain and everything that, you know, they, you know, instead of buying 3 things they can at a certain price, now they can only buy 1 or 2 things like that. And that's what they deal with. They have to figure out what's the most important thing they can spend with that money. Even with the 1%, it's still going to be that same situation for a while. So, so that, you know, that's why we're looking at a lot of this stuff. And a lot of the stuff, you know, none of them back there want to make these changes like anybody else, but they understand what's going on. And, you know, they've been going through these numbers probably the last 5 or 6 years, and we've been telling them, hey, the net new construction, this is what's coming, you know. So they've been prepared a little bit for it. So, and they all come within their budgets, and that's why when they said we have, or like the auditors came in, you know, either we were under budget, you know, we made our numbers were good this year is because, you know, we monitor it really well, and they stay within those numbers. You know, it's hard for them to do. You know, if they have one vehicle goes down, it could be $7,000, and that might blow the whole budget for the year to fix. So we're trying our hardest, and I think this is where we're at. And I think once we'll have those, we'll have that for after the referendum. The third option is, the second option if it fails is we don't do anything with the wages. Basically leave them as is and still 1%. And you can balance that with the wheel tax and moving the garbage. But you would, the other option that the budget they prepared is that it's just a wheel tax and then the garbage collection, which balances, but it doesn't give anybody their wage compensation issue. That still is going to be the problem, and it's still going to be the problem with our non-personnel.
And that would only take care of it for 1 year.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but it can be done, but I think everybody behind this knows it's not so much them, it's their staff that they're worried about too. Anyway, we'll say I know there's been issues with the wage compensation plan. It's been brought up with the unions and stuff like that. There is money in there set aside in labor negotiations in the referendum budgets. I know there's been some people have asked, well, where's the union number? It's not in the wage plan. It's been accounted for, is what I can say that we're looking at. I just don't want to give out the details until we negotiate them back and forth. But that's been accounted for in our analysis.
Mayor, just make a couple
Neil,
follow-ups with that. I just want to be very clear, this is not a recommendation by any stretch of the imagination at this point. This is simply trying to set the table to essentially have what could end up being obviously a very difficult conversation. I do want to echo what Mark's comments. Staff has worked very hard to try to do their best to put forward a budget that they feel is still responsible, and it provides them that allows them to still operate on a level of service that we think the community would find acceptable. However, you know, this essentially, I think folks have heard the comments about, well, the city's been operating at a deficit. That is absolutely not true compared to what Mark has just said. Really, we have done staff has done an excellent job of trying to stay really under their budgets and understanding the financial situation at this point. As part of our process going forward, should we have to, we believe if the referendum fails, what staff would probably need to do is to probably work on a recommendation to the mayor as quickly as possible based on one of those two scenarios or some combination thereof. And then we would be getting basically meetings, at least probably 2 meetings set up with council to kind of go through department by department at that point.
Basically,
Review.
committee of the whole for operating.
Exactly. So looking to probably, if we need to get those scheduled, certainly as quickly as possible, right after the election day. We think that the referendum budget, the passing budget is probably pretty straightforward, and we can move forward on that relatively quickly. If we need to, if it does not pass, we're going to need to go back in and probably do some refining to come up with a recommendation to bring forward. Probably the most frustrating thing, certainly not going to speak for staff, but certainly from my own perspective, is that list of cuts that we're talking about. In that list, at least 3/4 of those are things we're trying to grow in the referendum and try to expand.
Right.
Instead, we'd be taking a significant step backwards in those service areas. So I know that's frustrating for staff. It's certainly been frustrating for Mark and Leah and myself, even looking at these and trying to figure out a scenario that would be feasible and still work with the level of service that we think the community will expect. So certainly looking forward to having additional conversations on this as we go, but wanted to at least get this information in front of council to start digesting it and hopefully being able to establish some priorities relatively quick if we need to, depending on results of the referendum. So available for questions, Mayor.
And just a couple other things. I think Mark didn't really go into item number 5 here, but those are future things that we would need to consider, bigger ticket items going forward, because this is only going to get bigger every year. Another thing to take into account is if the referendum doesn't pass, if we decide to go to referendum again, the only time we can do that is next spring. And that is really, to go back that quickly, I think could be pretty problematic. But there is not an election in the fall, so that means the next one after that would be spring of '26. So that puts us 2 budget years behind then. So that's a discussion we would also have to have. How we would want to handle that.
Yes.
So
To that point, Mayor, I think we were hoping, and certainly the decision to go forward in spring again would be dependent on exactly the margin of difference in whether or not the referendum passed or not. If it was certainly a close effort, we could probably reposition fairly quickly and try to do some efforts to move something forward again in '26. But if it's a significant, margin of difference, that would certainly present some challenges that I think would be difficult to try to bring it back with any expectation of success right away.
that quickly, yeah. So, questions, comments? Doug?
Yeah, I guess I can, at the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to repeat myself. Just some comments that I had made, at finance, it seems like maybe that first year, the 105,000, a lot of that we might be able to get from vacant positions. Mark is projecting not just the police officer that's already vacant, but that there might be people who leave, and so we might, they might not be filled right away. Beyond that, it really begins to get impossible to fill that hole without making some really painful cuts, and probably have to do some of that in the first year. I guess my preference would be that we do things, if we had to cut, we cut things that we can reinstate, like fairly easily, such as contracted services, that if we stop doing them or cut them back, that if we get a couple of years down the road and we do have a more revenue source, whether it's from another referendum passing or state law changes, that, we could just go back to the contractor and, go back to the current level of service. And to do whatever we can to avoid layoffs. But again, that may be something we can do for a year, but we're beyond that. May be very difficult to do. So that's, one thing, obviously transit would be a big number that would really give us a lot of relief, but we've worked so hard to get to where we are. I really would hate to take that step back, because that might be, we might not get the same offer again.
Right.
And just to be clear, you're saying cut all transit, you're not saying
Yeah.
go back to Monona Express.
No. No.
That's, I mean, just to be
Because we wouldn't
clear.
be saving anything
No
there.
transit,
Right.
right, like
Right.
none. Yeah.
So that would, it's a nice big number and attractive in that way that it would solve a lot of things, but it would, we wouldn't have transit. So, I guess I just want to say to staff, I think that we're all suffering along with you, and it's got to be a really difficult time for you guys to go through, because you're waiting to see what's going to happen, in your professional lives. But it's only 2 weeks and a day to go, and it's, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been thinking about it when I wake up, thinking about it when I go to sleep, sometimes dreaming about it. It's, so.
It's a constant.
Yeah. So I think we're all sharing the same anxiety, I guess.
Yeah.
Alder DePulos had his hand up for a while.
Oh. Can't hear you.
All right, I had to unmute myself. So I just wanted to expand on what Doug said a little bit, and I want to thank staff for literally making Monona what Monona is. And that's what staff has done. Whether it's Public Works or Parks and Rec or Police and Fire or planning or admin, the staff people that work in Monona make Monona what it is. And it brings that value to our citizenry that makes us one of the best places to live in Dane County. And honestly, it's staff that does that. And I think that, what we're looking at through this process is we're coming to this point where we're asking the citizens of Monona to decide, do you want to be a bedroom community? Do you want to be a bedroom community with minimal services where you go to sleep at night and then get up and go work wherever you work and then come home and do the same thing over again? Or do we want Monona to be that destination, that place that people want to live, that place where people want to feel a part of something? And I think that we get that right now with all of the people that exist in our departments. And they're doing this on a shoestring. And I'm speaking directly to citizens right now, but they do things on a shoestring. In our planning department, we have people that work 65 hours a week that come to nighttime meetings constantly. And they're taking time away from their family. They're taking time away from things that they can do. And it's the same thing in every other department. Every other department does the same thing. We have Public Works and the meetings that they're supposed to attend at night in addition to their day job. And Mark said it very succinctly earlier, where when we start talking about adjusting office hours at City Hall, it's because all day long they're interacting with the public right now. I mean, it's not like we have this gigantic extra capacity to absorb these cuts. There will be significant changes to Monona if Monona wants it to, if citizens of Monona want that to happen. And it's our job to make that happen, but it will not be the same place. Anyway, that's all I have.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I say one thing? I
Sure.
think it's kind of funny. So I started looking into this. Everybody's, they say it's a financial, it's a state problem, because I looked at other communities. A couple communities are already starting to do this, where they're just saying, we don't want the state aid, and they can just go past their levy limit. They're not held to any restrictions, and you'll probably see more communities start to do that. I'm not saying that here, but I know 2 villages already that have already done that, and there's a lot of townships are starting to go that way, where the aid's not enough for them, for their communities, and they're just going past it. So it's really a restriction. I mean, I know it's all been around that we've been fiscally responsible, but if you look all over and you listen to everything and even research it, you'll find that this is happening everywhere, so that's.
And I can totally see why they would want to do that. I mean, going to a referendum demonstrates, we're entering into this transparent negotiation with the community to bring them along, to make everyone understand, and we're tied to it. We cannot raise taxes under certain circumstances because of state law, whereas what Mark is saying is some communities are just saying, screw it, we're just going to raise your taxes and we're going to turn down that money that other communities are taking from, you know. And then they avoid referendums.
Yeah.
They avoid arguments on social media, Facebook, Nextdoor, what have you. They avoid all the drama. And people just complain about their taxes going up, but they really don't.
It's surprising.
I-
There's communities are starting to do that. Not a lot,
Yeah.
but it is happening.
Mm-hmm. I just was thinking today, it's that time of year where people are re-upping their health insurance, so I'm doing the same thing at the end of the day where I work, and I'm reading that our premiums are going up between 7 and 11%, So my employer's operating budget is getting
Right.
hit, right? So it's everywhere.
Neil, did you want to say something?
Just as that if anyone obviously has any questions or just wants to follow up, certainly let Mark or I know. We'd be happy to listen. We are certainly open to suggestions, and if there's direction that individual alders are looking for or information, please let us know, because this will be, if the referendum does fail, this will be a little bit of a hustle to certainly get everything implemented and improved, and so we are
I think-
ready to do either one.
Just one other thing in terms of these numbers, I think you've told staff if they have a different way to come up with this amount of money, you're happy to hear it, right?
That's absolutely
It's-
correct. So, and certainly when we've identified the categories, just to remind council that the items identified in this list have been developed largely in partnership with staff over the last several months. In terms of looking at these things, certainly Mark and I have taken some liberties with the numbers and trying to make some things fit. But certainly, if obviously these numbers can move across departments still, even individual departments they've already, I think they've mostly exhausted their options, but certainly department heads always have that discretion to, if they have a different way to come up with those funds or to identify additional alternate revenues, they are certainly fully authorized and encouraged to bring those forward. So
I would say it's very hard right now. We exhausted a lot of stuff. And,
yeah.
So
Do we have a schedule on this? Like, are we, do it like, I didn't see in my emails a cow set up for operating or anything, are we?
We've tentatively just set some dates the other day. Neil, are we going to go ahead with those dates? Or?
Yeah, I think certainly we're going to probably, I'm going to have to make sure, obviously, we think when we can move fairly quickly. If the referendum passes, we could probably do it, literally have those committee of the whole meetings that same week. If it doesn't pass, staff probably will need at least that week to kind of hopefully update the alternatives, and probably would be meeting the following week. So we have a couple of hold the dates. We can certainly get those out, and so there will be two sets of meeting dates, probably one the same week of the referendum, and then the other one will be the week after Alder. So just we're trying to figure out a way to try to hammer them through and get them all in. We just think we're going to need, if it fails, we're going to need a little bit extra time to kind of prepare those alternatives. But I will get those out.
Yeah, right now we're looking at November 7th and 11th.
7th and 11th?
The thing is, we're going to need to bring it to council for first read on the 18th of November, because we really need to pass it in early December so that it gets to the counties so they can generate the tax bills.
unless we have a special meeting, but otherwise, yeah.
So, yeah, we may have to have some special meetings if it comes to that, if it does fail and we have to move some of these dates around. But right now, we're talking the 7th and the 11th, right?
That's great to know. I mean, I'd prefer to put a hold in my calendar.
Yeah, we'll get something out right away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another question would be, I'm assuming that the staff, and I'm thinking particularly of Parks and Rec, but it really applies to public safety as well. I'm assuming that as they do every year, that as part of their revenue generation, they'll be looking at fees again and whether or not there can be fee adjustments that could help out.
Yeah, actually, credit to Director Anderson and the Parks Committee actually have already taken a significant look at a lot of their fees, and I think even Alderman Pullen may have mentioned earlier, maybe not even having them, maybe wanting to consider maybe not high enough on some things, but obviously there's other considerations in terms of adjusting those fees and making sure that those programs are still accessible. But yeah, absolutely, Alder, there are certainly, I think even in planning and development, there's some things we may want to take a look at there as well. But yeah, absolutely, I think that will certainly be part of those operations in terms of those operational budgets. If there's opportunity to increase those fees, we'll certainly be taking a look at those.
I
Yeah,
know-
certainly in terms of accessibility, the other way to solve that would be, to develop things like scholarship programs or other things that could help for those people but I'm thinking more around non-resident things like the pool and other things like that.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mark, did you?
Well, I know that even the chief for EMS fees is already looking at that. That should
Yeah.
be coming here fairly soon.
Yeah.
So they're all looking at them, every account. I will say somebody asked me today, I got a call about, what about our pool? Increasing that. And they were saying something about maybe do like Shorewood. So I looked it up, Shorewood Hills, and they have a membership fee. Basically their pool fees, it's like almost $650 for a family compared to our $200. So they basically made it almost as a membership only. So we're not going to do that type of stuff.
Right.
That's then but yeah, so they're able to balance their pool by charging this large amount. We just can't do that to our residents.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you could.
I think Patrick had.
Patrick?
Yep, sorry, I know
Sorry.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention the pool again, and, we have talked about that in committee, and essentially it's a decision of, do we want to make money on the pool and then, factor in capital replacement for the future, or as Director Anderson has told me multiple times, we're disenfranchising, we're potentially the pool is one of our most diverse places in the summertime where people can go and cool off. So if we're talking about raising the price to be something that is, akin to Shorewood, where we can roll in the future capital cost of replacing the pool at some point, we're going to price people out of being able to use it. And I know that some people have mentioned, well, I've been to the pool, and they're not asking whether people are residents or whether they are residents, and everyone's paying the same fee. But you're essentially there's so much involved with it. You're essentially trying to take a teenager to confront someone and ask them for ID, and working with teenagers, which I do quite a bit, it's very difficult to do that. And it's also a strange situation to put them in. And also, are we interested in a diverse plan for Monona where we have amenities that are available to people, or are we going to, create a economic gate at the Beltline when you pull into Monona on Monona Drive and say, no, you can't afford to be here at all? So, and I think those are things that we need to consider when we're talking about raising fees like that. And if we're interested in providing services to people, or we're interested in profits, which we're not. So, anyway.
Anyone else? All right, well, we will continue to be looking at this all the time, 24/7. Thank you, staff, for coming in.
Thank you, staff.
Thank you.
Let's see, I'm just, one more item under unfinished business, consideration of ordinance 10-24-780, amending the code of ordinances pertaining to electronic vaping devices put forth by the License Review Committee. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move to approve.
Second.
Doug, did you want to talk about this a little bit again, or?
Sure. This is basically, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, to bring our definitions and our ordinances on vaping into alignment with state law and federal? Or
Yeah,
just state?
that's right. It was a change in state law.
Yeah.
They, prior law had required local licenses for cigarettes, tobacco products, that kind of stuff. The statute has been changed to include vaping devices in that category. So we just need to change our ordinances to include vaping.
Any questions?
I
Nancy?
do, just in terms of process then, now that we would be in the licensing scenario, since new stores, new retail, new whatever business normally goes through the plan commission and doesn't have to go through licensing. Depending on obviously what the service is, if it's a salon or something, you don't. So would it go, since they would have to get a license, would it go to licensing first and then plan?
It could go either way.
Okay.
Doug would know better. They're two independent, you know, when a bar opens, they need a liquor license.
Right.
They also need the zoning permitting. I don't know which one comes first, or if there is even a.
Speaking to the mic. It's typically a timing matter, that if it is, if it comes through Planning Commission first, we will condition that any permits, I think that most recently happened with the massage establishment, for
Right.
example, must be, obtained from the clerk, license review as necessary. So, it's sort of one or the other, depending on scheduling, but certainly we try and coordinate that.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Rick?
Doug, since you're there, how does this get implemented for, say, for existing licensees?
I'm not sure I would be the best one to
Yeah,
answer that.
this ordinance only applies to the licensing of it, not the sort of zoning and use permitting. So this would then go through license review committee, just like any other licensed establishment. So to open and to operate, they would need a license to sell vaping devices.
But if an existing licensee doesn't meet all of these requirements, what happens?
They're going to need this is not a zoning ordinance, this is so there would be no grandfathering. They will have to come into compliance, and they will have to get a permit from LRC in order to sell vaping devices.
So some licensees may lose their license.
Well, they don't have a license right now. They're doing it without a license.
Right.
Oh, there's no licensing at all.
Correct.
Right.
That's the point of this ordinance, is to require licensing.
Because state and federal law now does require it, right?
Correct.
So we have to come into compliance.
So if someone's selling vaping products now, they don't need a license?
Correct.
But there are some stores that sell more than just vaping products. They sell like Ignite or what have you. The changes are going to be made, so I'm sorry.
It would be just like selling of cigarettes. There's not a threshold. You're not permitted to sell a certain amount of cigarettes without a permit. If you choose to sell cigarettes in any amount, you need a license from the city.
Okay.
The same would be true of vaping devices.
Okay. But we don't know offhand who might not qualify under this new set of regulations. We haven't really surveyed the field to see how this might impact.
We have a pretty good idea who sells vaping devices, don't we? Because of the other thing we're working on.
We do, and I can certainly address that in a little bit, sort of the partnerships we've struck up there and sort of communication that we've had, but I don't believe this would impact that specifically.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think Alder DePula.
Patrick,
No,
did
that's
you
okay.
have a
Oh,
question?
sorry.
Right. Yeah, don't worry about it.
If there aren't any other questions, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, next, we're moving on to new business. Convene in closed session under Wisconsin Statute Section 19.85, paren 1, paren E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing in public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. This concerns the development agreement amendment with Besa Monona LLC. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder DePula,
Aye.
Alder Humquist,
Aye.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Rademacher,
Aye.
Alder Bernstein.
Aye.
We are in closed session. All right, we have returned to open session. I'm moving on to next item C, consideration of resolution 24-10-2745, approving the First Amendment to the development agreement with Besa Monona LLC. This is put forth by the Director of Planning and Economic Development, and it is started for immediate approval. So is there a motion to take it out of order?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second, Doug second. You good, Will?
Yeah, we'll go. Yes.
It's open.
Yeah.
We're good. Thanks, Will.
The developer, Mr. Gosh, is here. If anyone has any questions for him, if you do, he'll come up and Doug will share the mic with him. Does anybody have any questions?
I guess I have
Doug?
one.
Chris, if you could come up to.
Yeah, so from what, my understanding of it is things have not gone exactly as you'd planned when you started, and so you're behind on the construction. The 1.5 million required value by the end of this year, do you feel confident that you will make that number?
So depending on how that is quantified, if it's a cost basis, then we've exceeded that. And from where we have projected out to the end of this year, we should be significantly higher than that. So.
Okay.
But, you know, we're more than happy to work with staff and the assessor and whomever to provide evidence of that, if it's a
Right.
cost basis or however you want to do it, so.
And then after that, are you confident you'll be able to complete the project next year?
Next year, absolutely, yeah. We have a dentist that needs to open pretty quickly, so there's a lot of, there's a lot of moving pieces here. It's just been a frustrating, unfortunate turn of events here for this summer, so.
Okay, that's all.
Any other questions? Do we need a roll call on this?
You do not.
If there aren't any other questions, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for your patience. And finally, one more item. Consideration of ordinance 10-24-781, extending a temporary moratorium on the receipt of applications or issuance of permits or approvals for electronic smoking retailers put forth by the city administrator. And you want Doug to do this, or are you
I'll
gonna?
start off and then I'll turn it
Okay.
over to Director Plowman. Obviously, this is something staff's been working on for quite some time in terms of getting this in. We've had excellent discussions with several partners, and certainly also internally, certainly with PD, but also with the American Lung Association, Dane County Public Health, other partners where we just, at this point, we think we just need a little bit additional time to really kind of dial in exactly a little bit more feedback from those partners to really establish what rules we think we're going to need to move forward on. So in terms of if one of the options we're pursuing right now is going to be some sort of zoning, a buffer, between, certain types of uses, I think staff just requires a little bit more time and detail to kind of evaluate those uses and exactly what the distance of that buffer should be. We do have several examples. Certainly the city of Milwaukee is one I know Doug has been working considerably with in terms of looking at what theirs are. But we just need to, I think this would allow us to simply make sure that those new rules are based in findings of fact and are essentially feasible to move forward on. So Doug, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
That covers a lot of it. I appreciate that. So certainly, staff is requesting a 90-day extension. Included in the memo that's in the meeting packet is sort of some background as to some of the things that we have done here at a staff level, and that absolutely includes working with Public Health, Madison-Dane County, as well as the American Lung Association, getting kind of resources from them, as well as data specifically tied to Monona. That includes inspection reports, that question had come up earlier, includes inspection reports for businesses that we have in the city, because one of the things that we most likely will be looking at is sort of a buffer from existing businesses for sort of duplication of those. Of course, municipal facilities, schools and things like that, which was sort of in the grounding of the initial reason for the ordinance in the first place. And so looking to do that, to have those discussions with the chairs of the committees and commissions, and for that to be a joint effort coming forward as well. I did put together in the staff memo a suggested timeline. Of course, one of the challenges here as well is that with it being potential changes to 480 to the zoning ordinance, it does need the Class 2 notice as well. So there is just sort of some buffer that's needed for that. But the 90 days is really sort of what I would deem to be enough time to allow for considered review, keeping to a prompt timeline, and really not needing to come back for another extension or anything like that. So this does give some buffer, and the planning right now is for this to come first and second read to City Council at the January meetings.
Questions? Anyone?
I don't
Nancy?
have a question about directly about the extension, but I guess I'm still struggling a little bit of how any kind of ordinance changes would be, or permitting would be enacted, given that there are there's lots of establishments beyond very specific vape shops that carry vapes. So how, whether it's the Quick Trips or whatever, so there's, so I just didn't know what you're finding, just curious sort of, how that works with some of the ones that you've said, or some people are already enacting and all that. It's like, if it's a certain percentage of your business, is that the way it would work, or?
There appears to be kind of two ways that is approached, and that's either floor area, percentage of floor area dedicated to those sales, or percentage of sales revenue generated by those. So that's typically how it's done. One of the key departures here versus the city of Milwaukee is we're simply looking, this moratorium is on electric smoking retailers. There's extended more into tobacco as well. That's not something we're looking at as part of this, and this would simply be the electronic smoking.
Okay.
It's listed in the moratorium at page 71 of your packet. We define electronic smoking retailer and for purposes of the moratorium. And we say anybody that devotes more than 10% of their floor space.
Got it.
Or has 10% or more stock and trade of electronic smoking devices. And it's a little premature as to how the ordinance would be drafted, but I would suggest it would be a similar threshold.
Any other questions? Okay, well, this will come back in 2 weeks, right? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Did you have anything, we're moving on to reports, do you have anything you'd like to report to us before you go, Doug?
Nothing off the top of my head.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, reports of committees, commissions, et cetera. Please include any updates about sustainability efforts or DEI efforts if you'd like to. We'll start with Alder Holmquist.
No report tonight.
Alder Moore.
I think some alders may already be aware, the proposed billboard proposal went in front of the Plan Commission this last Monday night, and I would say was not particularly well received. And ultimately, we ended up tabling it to get some additional information together as it relates to Monona's history of banning billboards in the city. And so it'll be coming back to the Plan Commission fairly short order once that information is gathered.
Do you think it'll be on next week's agenda, or are you thinking more in November?
That's something we'll discuss.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a busy agenda coming up, but certainly the applicant has been in touch just to sort of ask about next steps. So we'll be looking at that, but it'll either be, I'd imagine, 10/28 or November 11th.
Okay. Anything else? No. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
There've been several things. Well, we're going to talk about that when Nancy gets back. So. Alder DePula?
No report other than, we public safety is meeting on Wednesday. So, and Doug will probably talk about our last parks meeting. But I think he talked about it at the last meeting. My dates are getting kind of combined at the moment. Anyway, no report.
Okay, and happy anniversary, by the way.
Thanks.
Alder Wood.
Yeah, Parks Board, we approved the acceptance of the Veterans Memorial at Ahuska Park, that the city would take that over, finally. And then we had a discussion of the budget scenarios, and that was it.
I guess just one question before you leave, Doug. Is the Veterans Memorial going to be on the plan agenda next week?
It's one of the tentative items. We have not received materials. We received an email requesting to be on the agenda, but nothing else. So,
what kind of materials do they need? The agreement, you think, or?
I believe
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I know they're really pushing because they want to have this transfer take place on Veterans Day,
Sure.
which is
Yeah.
the November 11th, so, and this is the third year in a row they've asked about it, so.
And my understanding, Assistant Planner Jepson's been working more closely on this, but my understanding is that I think there's some additional work, or there's another component to this as well. So I'm not sure that just the transfer itself necessarily warrants Plan Commission. I'm not sure sort of the scope of that, but my understanding was there was sort of an additional element, maybe some signage or something like that, that would have triggered the Plan Commission review. So it's sort of been on the docket when we've been speaking about this, but I couldn't say specifically what that is.
Jill, do you know?
Just the acceptance of the dedication alone would not have to go to Plan Commission.
Oh, okay.
So,
But we've definitely been aware of that deadline, so we've sort of kept it. It's always been on the working agenda, but we just haven't had materials for it. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so if we can avoid that, it'd probably be good.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
Doug?
but I think my understanding is there were some things that they needed to sort of complete,
Mhm.
maintenance, upkeep of the memorial, and that has been done, cleaning and so forth.
mhm.
So,
That is true. There was that work, dealing with the monetary escrow, I think was
They did
involved.
drop off the check last
Mhm.
week, yeah.
But nothing to my knowledge that they weren't going to change the monument or anything else. So unless there's something I'm not familiar with, I don't think it has to go to plan.
Okay, well, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
So we'll have it on the agenda at the next meeting unless something comes up. But
Yes, yeah.
hopefully we'll figure that out in the next couple of days so it can get on your agenda.
Definitely.
Okay. Alder Rademacher.
Sure. I'll just give a really quick rundown of some of the highlights. Landmarks was one of the commissions that met since our last council meeting. One of the things was a really heavy agenda. There was a lot of discussion about an opportunity to participate in a program from Dane County that was a historical markers program that is specifically for underrepresented communities. And the commission talked about what areas in Monona might qualify if we wanted to perhaps look into a marker for places like, a Harry Whitehorse Studio or Grand Crossing or the Pagoda, because the Pagoda, as we know it at Stonebridge, it is perhaps tied with a Native American, has Native American significance. So there were a number of interesting conversations there about what we might do to lift up those and represent those typically underrepresented communities. We also had a visit from our city administrator who presented some information about the Charles Lindbergh, or the Royal Airport marker, and some options for perhaps, how we now, in light of some new information that has come about regarding Mr. Lindbergh and his views that I certainly disagree with, and I know all my colleagues do as well, about anti-Semitism and white superiority. What do you do? Do you tear down the marker, or do you keep the marker and add a supplemental story that we now understand? So there were some great conversations, and those will continue into our next month's meeting. At the end of the meeting, there was a decision to allow city staff to move forward and look at some options of what we might do. And then we also talked about a walking tour next year, just continued discussions about working with Madison Trust and for Historic Preservation Month in 2025. So that's Landmarks. Tourism met, and the direction that tourism is taking, I think, is wonderful. We had a meeting where grant recipients were invited back to sort of report out on what happened because of the grants that they received. And it was really educational to understand, what went right, what didn't, what were some of the snags that they had along the way, some lessons learned. for us, it was educational. It was also educational for those other grant recipients in the room that were listening to, you know, what they might do differently the next time. So that was tourism. Also, I'll say about tourism that there's been some really positive changes in procedures and just tightening up some things that I appreciate. Third, I'll say sustainability. Among other things, I'll just mention, you know, a group of volunteers is taking on sort of a fun approach to draw attention to all the things that Public Works would like people to know about leaf collection season. For example, you know, don't put big sticks and brush in your pile of leaves. Don't put large pumpkins in your pile of leaves. You know, we only have 3 leaf trucks, and you know, there's no set schedule. Just all the information that we want people to know about, in addition to the environmental aspect of phosphorus getting into the lake. And so to do that, to get people's attention, the idea is that we'd sort of approach it in a fun way. And there's a contest that if you name a leaf truck, you can win a ride in the leaf truck. If you're a kiddo in K through 5 grades, you can also enter a coloring contest. You can also win a ride in a leaf truck. So it's been very fun working with Jeff in Public Works, and he sort of proofread all of our materials to make sure it was accurate, and he's been very helpful. So anyway, those are my reports.
Great idea.
Great.
Can Alder Bernstein speak first, Brad, or did you want to speak about the leaf thing?
Oh.
Yeah, I was just going to add, if you are an alder and have adopted a storm drain, please make sure you get your sign out, your yard signs. And for anybody else who might watch this in the recording or who are on, get those yard signs out. We're trying to promote that program, and my goal would be we get rid of all of our yard signs, because next year we're going to be rebranding that program, and new yard signs might be produced. So,
yeah, Brad, you bring
and
up
Alder Moore, if you noticed, I may have secretly dropped off a new yard sign because yours was in not so great condition. So.
I did. Thank you.
Awesome.
I don't know if I have room in my
Thank you
yard.
for your support.
Brad, thank you for bringing that up, Brad, because of course all of this, the fun and the contests and stuff, it also just obviously ties back to stormwater and getting your leaves out of the street and understanding that leaves flow straight into Lake Monona. And to Brad's comment about rebranding the Adopt a Storm Drain program, a subcommittee of folks met to talk about that as well, and Brad was included and Assistant Planner Jepson as well. And what we're aiming to do is to get away from this being just something we do in the fall, in the autumn, and to understand that these storm drains directly go into the lake all seasons of the year, and there is something that we can all do all seasons to keep Lake Monona healthy and to really tie it back into the lake. In the winter, reduce your salt. In the summer and spring, reduce your chemicals on your lawn. In the autumn, reduce the phosphorus going in. So we've got some folks meeting then for that subgroup that are working on that with Brad. So thank you for reminding me about that.
Thanks, Brad.
Hello.
Alder Bernstein.
Yeah, quickly. We haven't met yet, but I've talked to Diane from the senior center, and they're kind of waiting to hear about how Madison does with their referendum and how that might affect Newbridge, who depends a lot on funding from Madison. They do all of our case management, so if anyone's getting funding or they need help in getting funding from all the various federal, state programs, there may be some kind of cutback that affects some of the people in Monona, even though it's a Madison financing issue. In terms of the library board, we met last week, and they had a serious issue with the boiler, and it cost them $4,000. So over and above a roof, which I am so grateful that the mayor brought forth and that we passed, I think that's great. But there's still deferred maintenance issues with the library, with the boiler. So the money to pay for that boiler may come out of collections funding. So they're holding back on buying any new books or replacing older books until they see how things.
How about their fund balance? They have a huge
They-
fund balance, that's what that's for.
Correct. And they have been using that quite a bit, and it is being spent down a lot. And so there is some concern. They have a policy that they're supposed to maintain a certain level of fund balance. And so the policy does have a reason for being in place. So that's also some concerning. So they're balancing that with other issues.
Okay, just so you know, to me, the policy is so that you have the money available for things like this.
Right.
I know they spend it on bonuses for their staff and stuff, but it's really this kind of thing that should be the priority.
Yeah, and they, like I said,
So-
they're balancing their operating budget with the costs that they're
Yep.
facing, rather than taking out a fund
Well,
balance.
but I think, whatever.
Yeah, but the library has its own
Oh, I
policies.
know, we know how, they know how to spend their fund balance. They decide that, but I do think that this is why we have fund balances, is for emergency things like this. So if you go below for, 6 months or something, you build back up. But I hate to see you taking out of collections. 'Cause I know
Yeah.
the collection isn't that big, the money for that, so,
Well,
anyway.
That's my understanding at this point. One
Okay.
quick other point
Mhm.
with the library board, this is kind of an interesting, small issue, but an issue nonetheless. The Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, which used to be the Audubon chapter here in Dane County, has been inventorying the windows surrounding the library board, the library itself, and there have been a number of bird kills that run into those windows. The cost of making those windows bird safe is astronomical, but they did find that there may be one way to reduce those bird kills by taking down what is pretty old and somewhat diseased crabapple tree. So staff at Public Works has agreed to perhaps put that on their list, and that will help because the birds would like to use those crab apples, and it attracts birds to that particular location in the library. And they would look at the window and see those crab apples and crash into the windows thinking that was actually a crab apple tree. So it may not cost anything, but it would have a beneficial effect in the number of cedar waxwings and hummingbirds that are crashing into the window. So a small little success story with trying to alleviate that issue.
Okay.
That's it.
Both the chiefs, I guess, are gone. Aline, did you have anything to?
Yep, as of today, 1,400 absentee ballots have been sent out, 900 of which have been returned. In-person voting starts at City Hall tomorrow through November 1st, 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, additional hours both Wednesdays until 7 p.m., Saturday the 26th, 8 to noon. That's it.
So are you ready?
Yep.
I have
Alder
a
Moore?
question about that. Well, I remember when we changed and created the evening and weekend hours. I mean, I very specifically remember the discussion around that at this council. Like, do we actually have people show up during those hours?
So November, this is going to be definitely a higher turnout election.
Yes.
Comparatively, I do it for April and November.
Right.
So in August, lower turnout, February, lower turnout. I don't do the additional hours
Right,
because generally, no, they're not high.
right. But,
Traffic times.
with the higher elections,
Yeah.
do people actually take advantage of
There will
those?
be a few people there, yes.
Okay.
Will I be really busy? I don't think so, but
Okay.
yes, people will take advantage of it.
And I did ask, one of my neighbors asked me that yesterday, so I checked with Aline what the highest turnout for a presidential election has been, and you have records back to 2008, and was it like 91.0 something in 2020, I think, so.
91%.
Wow.
Yeah, of registered voters.
That's amazing.
In
yeah.
Monona.
Mhm. And it's been in the mid-80s most of the time
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah. So
Yeah.
I would say this one probably has that potential.
91.72%.
91.72, almost.
Somebody needs to do like a New York Times opinion piece on that. I mean, what community has 90% voter
She wants to
turnout?
put a sign in her
That's
yard
amazing.
challenging people to beat that. Maybe we could do a story about Gail's sign,
I
yeah.
like that. And then just for my own, the drop off in the ballot in the box, that's not, I'm not
Correct,
up on that
we do
news.
not have a drop box.
Correct.
We'll need to bring it in person
Yep.
when we're open at City Hall.
Yep.
Or to the polls on election day.
Thank you.
And if anyone has issues getting out of their car, definitely give City Hall a call and I can come out and get it from you at your home.
Yeah. Neil, did you have anything to?
Yep, couple quick things. Obviously, our next public information meeting for the referendum is this Wednesday night at 6:30 PM. So looking forward to answering questions again on that. Just a note reminder to the public, and I know special thanks to alders who have been out there and engaging residents on things. Please ask questions of staff or your elected officials on accuracy of information. We'll be very clear. We're not trying to sell anyone on how to vote, but we are very intent on making sure you have current, accurate information on which to base your decision on. So please, special thanks to those residents who have reached out. Mark and I have met with several residents, up to even an hour and a half at a time, for folks who've had a lot of questions, really gone through a lot of detail. Certainly we can't do that for everybody, but certainly if you have questions, don't just take social media's word for it unless you've heard from somebody from the city. We'll gladly provide the document or policy information to show you where we're getting our information from. We're happy to include that information at your discretion. So certainly we'll be willing to do that. One more farmers market, right, Mayor, coming up this next weekend.
We got to talk about that.
So we'll be available for there as well if anyone has any questions. We've been at Fall Fest. We've been at a couple of different farmers markets.
Chili Fest.
Chili Fest. We've been trying to make ourselves available. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to staff. Just a note that staff did provide some comments on the Madison Metropolitan School Sanitary District budget and their process at this point. They're in the process of hiring a new director, but also through the middle of their budget process, they've had some significant rate increases planned for quite some time. And the Dane County Cities and Villages Association has been a great convener of folks who have been frustrated with that process in terms of not getting the information early enough in our budget process, not being in a position to really review and comment on those things. So very excited to have that. So we did take the time and provided a host of comments. If anyone is curious and wanting to see those, I'm happy to send those out. Primarily regarding timing of getting the information out and explaining justifications for how they're coming up with their ranking system for their capital projects, as well as their hiring practices that they've got right now. So
Just right now, what are they? It's like they're planning like an average of, 8% increases per year for the next 10 years, right?
Yeah, and
Something like
I think
that.
one of the main concerns was,
Yeah.
I believe it was the administrator and the village president in McFarland who identified that they were borrowing at a certain level of funding, but they were only completing a certain number of projects that was less than what they were borrowing money for. So that money was theoretically going into their fund balance, but we're like, well, you don't have to be levying for that if you're not going to do the project. So that was, I think, a consistent concern amongst most of the partner communities, I think, including the city of Madison. So I think we were all really on the same page with that one. So hopefully looking for maybe not as much this year, but I think going forward, maybe some procedural improvements. And I think we just need to stay engaged with them on that. Staff is meeting with Wisconsin Department of Transportation on the US 51 corridor study tomorrow morning, kind of just taking a look at exactly what some of they're very early on in their process, and this is a federal project, so it will take years and years and years to actually accomplish, but have some concerns over some of the impacts to local roads in terms of what they may be requesting. So certainly be keeping, I know, Director Stefani in Public Works and Doug in Planning will also be keeping an eye on that as we go forward. Just a couple things from PD. Staff will be participating with our emergency services and active threat training coming up, I think, this Friday. So an unfortunate thing we need to kind of do and be aware of, but this day it is certainly in a facility like ours that has multiple entrances and exits and access, just kind of making sure we are up to speed on what procedures and what they would like us to do and how they'd like us to behave in case those incidents happen. Obviously, there's more and more information. Certainly, our both PD and fire responding to the accident on Broadway last night. We're still waiting for some more information to be released on that as we go forward. But it sounds like, unfortunately, there was a fatality involved in that accident. Just one note, one additional note on the election. The conference room at City Hall will be occupied through the election. So if you would normally have a meeting in there, or you would like to try to use that meeting, that room will not be available. But if you need a conference room, certainly let me know. We'll
During
make
the day.
During the daytime. But even evenings, if we have secured election,
There won't be anything.
there won't be anything in there. Okay. Just certainly call ahead and make sure that certainly can make my office available if you need to have a table for a meeting for the next couple of weeks. Happy to do that. So.
And there's lots of time space available in the library, too.
Absolutely.
Doug, CDA is in the conference room tomorrow?
That's the plan, yes.
That's all there.
Anything else? Attorney Cole?
I was just going to comment on one thing that came up tonight on, you're talking about staff and a lot of the discussion about, what they do and everything. One thing that I just recalled, last week, staff met with the Dane County solar coordinator person, and it was all about grant opportunities, and the focus of the conversation was all sort of like electric vehicles, solar panels, that kind of, big picture kind of stuff. We get to the end of the meeting, and the public works director sort of says, hey, we're doing some of these pedestrian flashing things that were on the agenda for tonight. Would those qualify? Because they're solar. And the county person says, she thinks about it, and she's like, well, nobody's ever really brought that up before, but I don't know why they wouldn't. They're solar. And I just highlight it to the council because it's that sort of outside the box thinking that your staff does all the time, and nobody, it came up today. He was there. They're modest enough they don't talk about it, but it happens all the time. And I just want to bring that to your attention.
Yeah,
That's great, Bill.
thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question.
Rick?
Neil, or the mayor, at the library board meeting, there was information about how committees are going to be required to make Zoom available. Do you know any more about that?
Yeah, we've had a discussion certainly with Director Kleinwell came over and asked about that, and I think while it's been kind of a general understanding since Zoom that we were kind of expecting, I think the public expects those meetings to be available and participatory through Zoom. We don't have, I don't think, a firm official policy in place. We talked about it. I don't know if everyone got implemented.
We have a policy from COVID, but it's
Right, so we are looking at taking, kind of evaluating that and probably be bringing something forward at an administrative level to have that requirement, I believe.
most committees do it now.
Right.
But I think my understanding is the library board's never been available via Zoom. Well, they are just recently, but
Yeah, they did the last meeting.
yeah, but during COVID they didn't or
Right.
anything, so.
And I think the Senior Citizens Committee is going to do it this November, but it would be hard to get them to do it on a regular basis, I think, unless they were directed to.
Right, and that's what we would be doing, would be directing them. Because
Yeah.
it really, these are public meetings, we have the technology.
Yeah.
We've invested in technology for some extra rooms. I've talked to Ryan in the past about doing it in this boardroom.
Oh.
But we need to look at what we passed during COVID and then consider what changes we might make or
Cool.
whatever, so.
I think it's great.
Good. We will keep you posted about the operating committee of the whole. Obviously, we won't plan on those two dates in the hope that this passes. But then it's going to be really churning it out to get you something to read at least the day before the first meeting. So, and the only other thing I had to say, for anybody who has questions about the referendum, in addition to contacting the council or contacting the city administrator, we have a really good website with all kinds of information, mymonona.com/referendum. I know I read somewhere on Facebook that, the compensation plan study city hasn't posted that. It's there. Just look, because there's a lot, we've posted about everything we can think of that's related to this, any kind of background information we have, and if you don't find it there, then ask us, so.
That was actually the first thing we posted, Mayor. Just
Was
for
the
record.
compensation
Was the
study.
compensation plan, yep, absolutely.
So, we have no appointments tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.